I'm sure if the sound isn't working, we'll be informed of it again. Anyway, but it's a new day. It's a new Friday. Welcome to what is usually the Fragments of Silicon European interviews, but this time we're actually going to South America, as we welcome back to the program Andreas and Carlos Bordeu of Ace Team.
Hello. Hi, guys.
Hi.
How are you?
Yeah, how are you both doing today?
Good. Everything's fine here. It's a fine morning here.
That's good to hear. Right. So I think last time you were on the broadcast, it was about 2 years ago, maybe a little bit more.
Yeah, I think it was only me.
Andreas,
yes. Maybe we were talking about Rock of Ages. I'm not sure.
I remember we were talking about Rock of Ages 2, which was in pre-release at that point in time. And indeed, we are going to be starting the interview with Rock of Ages 2, mainly the Switch version.
Sure. Okay.
Because to hear, did you have to make any sort of compromises or development tricks to get the game to work on the Nintendo Switch? Because it's a very tight space. It's a portable device. Other developers have lamented the quirkiness of the Switch, let's say.
So, yes, there are a couple of compromises we did have to do with the game. The one I missed the most was not having split screen simultaneous co-op. There was not enough time to get the performance to be there for us to allow that feature. And of course, I mean, the console and PC versions look slightly better because, I don't know, shadows are a little bit sharper, textures and everything. But other than that,
I think another compromise was that the maximum amount of units is a little bit lower.
But that's also true for the other consoles. The PC version can handle, you can place more units on the levels.
Okay.
But everything else should be pretty much the same. It's our first Switch title, so again, as we start producing more games for the platform, we can maybe optimize our workflow and get better results.
Did you put in multi-system local co-op?
Not sure what you refer to by that.
For the Switch, you can do local co-op with multiple Switch systems. That's kind of what they're doing instead of split screen. You see it a lot for games like Mario Kart and stuff.
I didn't do the porting work myself, so I'm not exactly sure which online feature. I'm pretty sure they used the standard online, which we have featured in previous titles. So I don't think we
did that.
We've used that feature.
But now it's interesting. It could be interesting to explore that for Rock 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just seems like that's kind of what the Switch is designed to do instead of split screen, since the screen is sometimes tiny.
Yeah.
And there can be the expectations of multiple Switches in the same area. But did you guys handle the porting duties yourself, or did you contract out to another company?
No, we did it internally. Part of the programming team, a small part of the programming team, was working on it for quite a while. Pretty much internally.
Makes sense. And overall, did you find the Switch workspace to be a comfortable one?
I mean, it's probably the hardest system to get certified at this point when compared to the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. It's a little bit trickier. Again, that's mostly a question for someone from the programming area. I was the project lead, but not so much into all the technical stuff, but I did know we had to tackle some difficult tasks from that point of view. So I mean, we got it done in time, so not that it was too difficult or terrible or anything. But again, having more experience on the other SKUs is always an advantage. So we're hoping that as we move forward with more projects, we'll get a little bit more
comfortable with the Switch.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good to hear. Let's see. I suppose the question at this point is, how well did Rock of Ages 2 do on the Switch? If you can, I probably not exact sales numbers, but was it a hit or a miss?
No, I think I can't get too much into sales information. Actually, the most a majority of the sales data we haven't even received it completely yet because it's always offset by several months. And we only received some partial reports up to the date. I think any game that released after the simultaneous, you kind of miss the window where the game is kind of in the general radar of the because when we did the release on the other consoles, it was accompanied by a lot of marketing stuff, and when we did it on the Switch, it was a little bit.
It's more limited. Basically, you're not striking when the game is being played by the YouTubers and all that. So there was a lot of Rock of Ages press going around when it launched on the other platforms. So yeah, the Switch flew more under the radar for a lot of people. But I think. If I had to say something, I think it could have done better than some of the other consoles if it would have launched simultaneous, but I would not say that it probably did.
I mean, making sure that it works right on the Switch might take a little while. So
yeah. Plus, if I'm recalling, Rock Ages came out in 2017 when the Switch was a lot newer, a lot more unknown. So it's understandable that the Switch version was late. And it's not an uncommon phenomenon for Switch ports. That they do oftentimes arrive late.
Hopefully it's doing well enough, though, because it's a pretty fun game, and I think sort of in general it hits the... I mean, not quite as good for the party thing if it doesn't have the local co-op, but it's still a fun kind of game for just getting...
Yeah, and I do want to clarify that Rock of Ages 2 initially was not going to be on the Switch. It was actually something that we proposed afterwards. The original plan for the game did not include the Switch, so it's not so much that we weren't on time with the SKU because it was harder to port it or anything. It's just that it wasn't part of the original plan.
Right.
And probably if Rock 2 wouldn't have sold all that well on the other platforms, there would have never been a Switch port. It's because it did pretty well on the other platforms that we actually went ahead and talked with the publisher and went over
and one of the reasons it also took quite a while was getting dev kits here in Latin America.
Yeah, it's not the same.
Quite tricky with Nintendo.
I can imagine. Nintendo does not have the best reputation in Latin America, unfortunately.
Well, we can only speak for our experiences, but not too many companies doing Nintendo ports, at least here in Chile that I know of. At least there's 2 other companies that are trying to port titles here in Chile, but I spoke to them months ago, and I haven't seen their games still in the marketplace. So either they're having huge technical problems, or I'm not sure what's going on there.
One can only speculate from the outside. Anyway, so another interesting thing about the Switch port of Rock of Ages 2 is this was actually published by Sega instead of Atlus.
Yep.
And indeed, getting a bit ahead of ourselves, Soul Seraph was published by Sega, and now you're working with other publishers instead of your longtime publisher, Atlus USA. I don't know how much you can talk about this, but it is an interesting transition going forward.
Sure. So for the most part, I guess you guys know that Atlus was acquired by Sega. So
It's not. Yeah, it's basically not. It's the same people we're working.
We were working with the same people, so it's more that the Atlus account was moved to the Sega account. So from a production point of view, at least for Rock of Ages, that didn't change too much from our end.
That's not surprising, since there have been other games that were previously published by Atlus that have gotten sequels, like Galactic Citizens of the Galaxy or whatever. Like that was, like Citizens of Earth was published by Atlus. Now it's Sega. I just figured, that got subsumed into Sega, but nobody really talked about it. So
no. Yeah, but it was a transition from when the company was purchased by the other one.
Yeah, more of a thing for them than really for us.
Really for us, yeah.
And moving on to the next part of the question, so why have you moved on to, like Modus is publishing Rock of Ages 3, Good Shepherd is publishing the Eternal Cycle.
Cylinder. Eternal Cylinder.
Sorry, I was thinking of another game there. Yeah. The Eternal Cylinder. You are working with other publishers now. Is there any particular impetus behind that?
So we are at a point where we're trying. When we were pitching some of the concepts, we were looking for partners that kind of were super excited with the project. We had a very long relationship with Atlus over the years, and we kind of got used to always pitch them games. And we knew that, for example, the Eternal Cylinder was a pretty bold concept to pitch to a publisher, and for that we needed maybe a fresh new group of people that were willing to make that leap with us. We've done more traditional things with Atlus more recently. I know they did work with us on Xenoclash and Rock of Ages years ago, but also the company has been changing a little bit over the years. And for Rock of Ages 3, it was something that in the end Modus was they really pursued it with a lot of strength. They had a lot of faith in the project. They wanted to do a lot of cool stuff with it, so it just made sense from a business perspective.
Yeah, one thing I can say is that I would say that this question wouldn't be special for maybe any other for a lot of developers, because it's kind of normal to switch in between publishers for titles. It just happens to be that we were with Atlus for so long that it's a question that's interesting in our case, because we kept on making games with them. And Andres is right. We basically at some point kind of got used to the fact that they were the sole publisher almost in the market. But it's been very interesting now as we branch off working with other studios. And I can speak a lot about Eternal Cylinder since it was the game I was mainly trying to pitch. And Good Shepherd is a natural fit for that project. It's a really ambitious but very unconventional project. So it wasn't an easy pitch at all, even though everyone fell in love, like everyone we showed the game would fall in love with it. It's a project that requires you to go ahead and work on an unproven sort of design, because the game isn't similar to other titles.
Indeed. So on the subject of the Eternal Cylinder, for the uninitiated, exactly what is it, if you can put it into words?
It's the Eternal Cylinder is a survival adventure game, but as I was showcasing the game to people at Gamescom, we just recently had a hands-on demo with the press at that event in Germany. I noticed I had to sort of correct myself in saying that I'm throwing you off when I say survival, because it shares some elements with survival games, but in general it's very different, because in survival games you're usually building your houses, like chopping trees, getting some resources, getting some wood to build your base or whatever. And in this game you're always on the move because of this gigantic cylinder. So you're basically growing your herd of little creatures, which are called the trebum, and they act as your main base. Like you play with them like this nomadic herd. So you, instead of growing a settlement or structures, you're growing your family by stacking mutations onto these creatures and exploring this super weird alien world.
I think a quicker way to put it in less words, it's imagine you're in a completely alien world, you're at the very bottom of the food chain, and you wake up, you hatch from an egg, and you have to survive using like your the capacity of these little creatures to modify to adapt to the environment by mutating and gathering elements from the things that they can consume.
Honestly, that reminds me less of, say, Minecraft or any of those games, and more of, say, Spore. You know.
Yep. A lot of people has compared it.
Yeah, it's been compared to Spore, but it's. I think we wouldn't want people to think it's like Spore, because even though you have these creatures that can mutate, it's not like a creature creation kit.
Right.
Sort of thing.
All the mutations in the game have like practical uses. For example, you started out, this is part of the demo. You're in a ditch in the tutorial section. And a grasshopper creature jumps into the ditch and lays an egg. And if the trebum, the little creature you're controlling, eats that egg, it acquires like grasshopper legs. So now it can jump out of the ditch. So that kind of same example can be applied to every other mutation in the game, where you have practical uses for the things you acquire along your journey.
And you're always running from this big rolling thing.
Yep, but not always, because the game has portions in which it stops, and then you have more free exploration, and you're not limited by a timer. It's not all the time running. We did have that at the beginning, but it was too much.
Tedious.
Yeah, kind of tedious. So we basically have sections in which the cylinder stops. There's other portions where it moves really fast. So it's been an interesting project, because it's not like you have a reference. You say, okay, so this is like this game, but with a cylinder. It's really its own thing.
Right.
It's certainly an interesting take on things. Like,
I guess it would be really hard to do a proper game with any kind of exploration if you were always under pressure, because you'd be like,
it depends on how the pressure.
I'd sure love to explore this, but I'm a little bit concerned about the fact that I'm about to be crushed to death.
It depends.
Yeah, exactly. That is exactly the point.
I would say it depends on how the pressure was applied. I mean, something that immediately is, really hard. But I mean, more the original Pikmin is what I'm thinking. You know, that had a timer, but it was a long enough timer where you could do exploring.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like, but any sort of time element is going to have a pressure element to it as well.
Mm-hmm.
I can certainly understand why that was nixed, or at least scaled back.
Sure. We want to mix it around. Sometimes, as Carlos mentioned, it's a little bit faster. Sometimes it's static. Sometimes it's regular speed. So you get a little.
You get a different experience. The speed of the cylinder changes the experience of the game drastically. So that's something we can play around with a lot.
Yeah. I suppose the junction in question here is exactly what influences the speed of the cylinder.
Okay, so there are portions. You have these like massive anchor towers, which are these safety areas, which you need to activate early on in the tutorial. Actually, in the gameplay that it's being shown here, you have the little creature which has already the grasshopper legs, and there's this like shaft of light coming upwards, and there's like an elder of your creatures dead there, and he transfers the ability for you to activate these towers. So what you're going to see is basically the little creature is going to acquire this power, and then you have to run because the cylinder starts gaining speed, and then you can activate these towers, and that gives you a safety area. So the cylinder, in between one row of towers and another, can move pretty fast. It goes into this kind of berserk mode. It glows all red. It throws some light. So yeah, that's one of the ways in which we interact with this cylinder.
Mm-hmm.
And outside of like dealing with the cylinder, how goal oriented is this game? Like, is there a thing that you're building towards, or is it just like to survive as long as possible?
So this is a pretty fantastic world, and a lot of people are going to be very intrigued by the story, by the elements. You can see that there's like ancient structures that kind of hint there was a civilization here. So there's a lot of story elements to it, and as you progress in the game, at first you're this little creature that's pretty much trying to survive, trying to figure out who's trying to eat me, where can I find more of my kind. But as it moves forward, you're going to start understanding a little bit about this world. What is the cylinder? What's its purpose? So we don't want to spoil the story, but yes, it's not just one of these survival games where you can just travel around the world and you just have to like collect stuff. It's pretty story.
It does have a story. It does have an antagonist. It does have a narrator. It does have chapters. It is different also in that sense. Pretty different to most survival games.
Right. Survival games are not known for their story, which is understandable since the ultimate goal is just to survive as long as possible.
So with an interesting setup like this, it's nice to get some story with that, because otherwise it would be like, well, the cylinder is never actually explained, so it's just kind of a thing you're running from.
Yeah. No, that won't be the case.
Now, you've mentioned a couple of times that this is taking place on a completely alien world. It's completely alien creatures. Are you worried about accessibility in that regard? Or rather, how are you going to handle conveyance of the world? Is it going to be just environmental storytelling, or is there going to be like an encyclopedia of creatures and whatnot?
Okay, so there's three different things about that. So at first we started going for the whole that the world by itself would tell the story, but given how surreal and different everything was, we eventually figured out we needed some sort of narrator that was going to help you understand certain parts of the world and give you hints on what to do, where to go, and it worked really well. We were very pleased with the reception to the narrator from previews and people who's been playing. So that's one way in which we address accessibility. There's also the fact that you will have a compendium where there's a description of the creatures, a description of the fruits and plants and things that you eat. So there's going to be some lore in that part of the game, but we do find that it's interesting that we will want a lot of people who played it are given like this sense of mystery. I want to know more about. I want to understand what these creatures are and where they come from, and that's going to be obviously a fun part of the game.
So it had a good reception at games.
Yeah, it was super great. We got some really good coverage. The guys at Rock Paper Shotgun chose it actually as one of their, if not the favorite game of the show in the podcast when they were talking about it. So yeah, we got some pretty good responses to the limited demo that we showed there.
Well, that's good to hear. And now the Eternal Cylinder's been in development for a while now, like maybe 4 or 5 years.
No, that's not very accurate. I mean, this project started out like a passion project in which Carlos was working on.
Yeah.
So he did develop kind of a concept like this demo, which is the very old video that's on YouTube that you're probably referencing. It was called the Endless Cylinder.
Yeah.
But it's not like we were working on it since then. It was dormant for several years while we were working on other projects.
Mhm.
And when we finally decided to pitch it, while we were pitching other concepts, and it blew off, then we said, okay, how do we transform this into much more than that preliminary concept was at that point? And we decided to turn it into a full-fledged game. So the development cycle has not been that long.
Okay. Okay, because yeah, I do remember this being announced under that previous title, and
Yeah.
you know it just went dark for a long time. So
Yeah. Yeah, no, if we would have worked on it, we've never taken that long to make a game. No way.
fair enough, fair enough. But so, how long has actual development been going on with the Eternal Cylinder?
It's a little tricky, that question, in a sense, because at certain point the demo, the old prototype starts to blend into what an actual game is. So you have chunks of it being developed like out of the window of the traditional, okay, here starts the project. So more than a year and a half.
I'd say a year and a half would have
Year
been
and a half.
my ballpark.
Yeah, but
Figure.
we had some stuff done before, obviously.
Okay. And maybe this is another thing that's hard to pin down, but how much more development does this game need before you think it's ready for prime time?
We really can't get into that. I mean, it's going to be released next year, and that's all we're allowed to say for the moment.
It's a 2020 release.
Understandable. Now to address something that's always a bit thorny, but it has to be addressed. So this game is coming to the Epic Games Store, correct?
Correct, sure.
Now, was that something that you wanted, or was that something the publisher wanted?
I mean,
We have a long-lasting relationship with Epic. We've been working with Unreal Engine and very closely with them for several years. And they had seen the project a long time ago, and they were really interested all these years since then. So it was only natural to be approached by them and to start discussing with them. We also need a partner that really believed in the project, and so it came by pretty naturally.
yeah, I mean, we have more than a regular relationship with Epic. They're not just our technology provider. They've been with us, I would say, even longer than Atlas. We basically got we had special terms for using the Unreal Engine 3 when it was available. They've come here to Chile to visit us multiple times. So they've always been a partner of us. Maybe that's something that's not very known about the studio, but like Andres was mentioning, it came as a pretty natural thing. It was something that obviously came in conjunction with the publisher, definitely, but yeah, it was pretty natural that it would happen in our case.
Okay. And how has been the reception to this? Because, well, the Epic Game Store is kind of a minefield these days.
Yeah. So in our case, no, you're always going to find people who are kind of disappointed because they were hoping it would come first on Steam. But no, it's been pretty. I mean, the people that know us kind of understood why that happened, and so there hasn't been much fuss about it.
I mean, we also haven't tried to like have to explain anything. It's kind of obvious. So I don't think we didn't write any blog posts or anything. We didn't feel we needed to. So it's been pretty smooth sailing, I would say, considering.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Well, on the scale of exclusivity, you're timed exclusive to Epic Game Store, or
Timed? Yes, it's a timed exclusive. It's the regular. Yeah.
So about a year.
We can't get into details, but it's all we can say it's a timed exclusive.
Duly noted. It's just, it is known that the standard Epic Game Store exclusive is 1 year, but there are different cases. Anyway, so has the Epic Game Store collaboration helped the game?
It's super early at this point. We're pretty much setting up the storefront and everything. Now, we do expect that we'll get a lot of support from Epic.
We actually did. I mean, if you think about it, Epic showcased a limited amount of games at PAX, and Eternal Cylinder was one of them. So that's, for instance, something that is pretty special. I mean, you wouldn't get that. I mean, I can understand why it wouldn't happen if you were to put the game on Steam, because they have so many games. And in this case, it's not the case. But Epic did go to PAX and showcase 5 games, and Eternal Cylinder was one of them. So that is part of the support we're getting.
But this was we're starting to get on board on the Epic Game Store. Really, it's been a short period of time since we announced this, so there's a lot of stuff that we have to do going forward, and we're expecting a lot of support from them.
Like, well, hopefully it works out. You know, let me see. So, getting back to the game itself, this is another question that I'm not sure you can answer at this point, but I'm wondering. Is the creature that you are controlling, is this just a one generation affair, or is this going to be multiple generations, and is like breeding going to be involved?
It's so the Trebon have mutations that change their appearance on different levels. So basically, if you would talk about progression in the game, it's twofold. So on one end, it's how many of the creatures you're playing around with. In this case, you can see in the video, there's already a party of 4. So you have to start acquiring more of them, like finding other little brothers, sisters, like siblings to run around and explore the world with. That's one layer. The other layer is stacking mutations on top of them. So you can basically, for instance, change the trunk of the creature. You can change the shape of the body. You can see there's the little cube one walking around, which worked as a key for that door puzzle that happened earlier. He now has this trumpet mutation. Now they're being demutated by this enemy over there. Like there are these enemies called the Servants of the Cylinder, which can take away your mutations. So basically, it's different than other, I guess, evolution sort of games where you have a level 1 evolution. It's not like Pokemon in that sense, level 3 evolution. No, it's you can stack on different mutations for the creatures and in different parts of their bodies.
So you have eyes, trunk, skin, body, and legs.
Yeah.
Yeah. And are mutations purely beneficial, or are there like negative mutations?
There are a few that are negative. We're still playing around a little bit with how that should happen, because it's kind of obvious if you eat something and it's negative, you won't want to eat it again. So we're looking at maybe doing some sort of parasitical sort of thing. But yeah, there are a few that can be negative, but for the most part, we don't really want to add player options where they will suffer for them. So most of them are positive.
You'd probably have to get them. If you get a negative thing, there's probably a way to get it removed, because you can get positive ones removed.
Yeah, correct.
And what would be an example of a negative mutation in this game?
We have losing your blurry vision, for instance, with eyes, and we blur. Like there's this creature that's called the Sniffer that is like this sort of ostrich sort of thing that only smells. It uses its sense of smell to follow. So if you eat its one of its body part, you lose the capacity to see that well. You can also lose your legs. There's another.
There's a limp, like long trunk. I think we had planned out.
No, that one's still not in the game because of technical difficulties.
I thought that one
There's
was
a
funny.
there's a grouchy trunk that makes kind of noise and it's annoying and can make you
draw attention.
Draw attention from predators. Yeah, there's a few of them. Again, most of them are.
But as Carlos is mentioning, the cool thing about this is whenever we think about a specific mutation, it always has a purpose in the game. It always has a new function. So we want people to kind of experiment with them and figure out, oh, cool, this new body part, what does it do?
Are the names and color schemes of the creatures preset, or are they random?
When you get a new Traboom, they're completely random. They have like all the different kind of skins. One of the cool things we want to do is we want people, when they find a new Traboom, we want them to be able to name them. So you have more connection with your party. Maybe you look at a little guy and he reminds you of a friend, so you can name him as your friend. If not, they'll get random generated names. So we really want to create this sensation that you care for your little creatures. They're gonna react in different ways to things that happen in the game. If one of them gets eaten by a predator, the other ones are gonna be sad. When you find the new one, they jump in joy, and you look at it, and then you leave them alone. They start doing these little interactions and dances between each other. So we really want the Trebooms to shine.
And in terms of the development of the world and everything, is this being handmade or is it using procedural generation?
It's a mix of both. So we have like portions of the game which are completely and entirely set, like handmade by us, because they will be key parts of progression that we don't want players to like, because the word procedural tends people have a certain expectation for what a fully procedural game will give you, and those games are pretty cool because they give you a lot of diversity in terms of things that are going to pop up in the game. But we also want a little bit more of a handcrafted experience, a more guided experience. Remember that we were saying this game is a story, a progression. So it's a mix. There are portions of the game where we connect procedural, handmade environments in a procedural way. So there are it's open world and basically infinite in all directions. You can always explore like all the way to Horizon as much as you want. That was a pretty challenging part of the technology. Getting that to work has been super difficult. But we didn't want to sort of let a computer algorithm like decide where everything goes and everything, because our experience as developers has also been of people who made like really handcrafted games. So
that makes sense. It's just, once again, when you talk about survival, one of the things that comes to mind is randomly generated worlds.
I think there are good examples of games that are completely static and still survival. Isn't The Forest completely like the static world, pre-designed?
I'm not sure if it's.
I'm pretty sure it's pretty. There's nothing procedural about it.
Maybe
and I love that game. Maybe the caves are random.
No, but I would say that for sure the creature placement isn't predefined.
No. But the environment.
The environment probably is.
At least whenever I went through it, it looked always the same.
Which game is this?
The Forest. It's a pretty popular game on Steam. It's like this horror game where plane crashes and you have to find a boy.
Yeah.
And there's like these
cannibals or zombies sort of creatures
that are coming out of like it's a first-person game.
That sounds interesting.
Yeah, I've heard of The Forest. I'm I think that one actually got released. Like it actually got.
It was for early access for so many years, and it's already
I mean,
released
that,
by now.
that's another thing about these or the survival crafting games. A lot of them languish in early access for a long time. And that gets to my next question. Are you going to do an early access period for the Eternal Cylinder?
No, this is going to be a regular release. Now, as you correctly point out, these games tend to be in development for a very long time because people kind of enjoy the ability to explore these worlds. So one of the things we always try to do with most of our titles is that after we release them, we try to give a lot of like post-release support. And obviously, if Eternal takes off and it's enjoyed by a lot of people, we would definitely
there's definitely a plan to continue working
developing
on additional content. But another interesting part here is that there is a beta. There's going to be a closed beta that if you go to theeternalcylinder.com, you can sign up for it. So anyone interested in the game, I recommend that you go visit the website and apply.
And is this game being developed for PC only, or is it being developed for consoles as well?
PC and consoles, but the consoles, exactly which consoles, is still undefined.
Well, we are reaching the precipice of a new generation, so that's understandable. Anyway, so moving onwards, I suppose we should talk about Rock of Ages 3 next.
Yep.
And the question that comes to mind is, what's new, what's different, what's been changed in Rock of Ages 3?
So over the years, we've been really listening to the community, and the biggest request was to have the creator mode, the level editor. And that's, I'd say it's the biggest addition we're bringing to the game. There's a lot of like new game modes, new units, new boulders. We've tinkered a little bit with some of the game modes, but for me, what really shines is the level creator. Actually, when we were at Gamescom in the presentation, it was cool because I started playing the game. I introduced one of the new themes that was one of the Oriental levels, and we paused it in the middle of the session, and I pressed the button and showed how this level was completely built with this new tool that we've been working on, and how this obstacle course map that looked pretty much like a really cool Rock of Ages level had been was completely editable. We could move around pieces of the track, move around stuff. What's really interesting for me is that the same tool with which we are building the campaign is what we're going to be giving out to the community, and we're going to allow people to share maps, upload them to this server. So there's infinite possibilities. This is what I think is going to be the strength of the title.
Hey, it worked for Mario Maker.
It's like Mario Maker, Rock of Ages.
Well, it's worked for games since Load Runner, which was quite a
Yeah, I played that one.
And how robust is this creation tool?
So again, we're looking to make it as robust as possible. I mean, if there's something in the campaign which is now going to feature like around 70 levels, like are more than twice what the campaigns from the previous games. Again, if there's something in the campaign, it was built with the level editor. So if we feel there's something missing that we want to add to the game, we have to make sure it's compatible with the tool that we're going to give to the community.
I see. And is this game going to have Steam Workshop support?
So we're thinking now, what's the best way to share levels? And since it's going to be on consoles, Steam Workshop is not on consoles. But I think the natural transition is going to be to use Workshop because it makes sense on Steam. We're not at the point where we've done that integration yet. I don't see why we wouldn't go that way. So I'm just not confirming it because we haven't gotten there yet. But
Right.
I think it eventually will have Steam Workshop support.
It sounds logical. And now, outside of the creation tool, like what sort of new units are being added?
We have several new kind of fun units. It's pretty hard, challenging to make more units at this point because one of the tough things is that many people might not notice this, but there was very careful calibration when we had to do all the units in Rock of Ages 2, and we already have such a big diversity of different kind of structures and whatnot, that when we introduce new units to the existing roster, you can easily break the balance of the game.
And I want to stress pretty strongly what Andres is saying. Rock of Ages, if you play competitively, it's super competitive. I mean, I know a lot of people, some people who played it kind of have complained that you can cheese out maybe with some of these strategies, but if you get a seasoned Rock of Ages player to play against one of these levels where maybe someone just simply splatter out a bunch of catapults and that maybe worked out against the AI, which is never going to be as good as a human, seasoned Rock of Ages player would totally destroy that person. The defense part of the game, knowing how to defend your track, is super. It has a lot of depth to it. So adding new units means having to rebalance a lot of what is already working in the game.
Yeah, so we strayed a little bit from the question, but what we're going to have, like, for example, some examples. We're going to have a Yeti that can freeze boulders. We're going to have
I like the frogs.
We're gonna have the bumper frogs that are on a pinball machine that they inflate and they can push back the boulder. We have the wheel of pain. That's a big structure that's spinning and has 4 arms that can knock the boulder out of the way. We have this big I can't remember the name of
Trojan horse.
The Trojan horse is another cool unit that you can shoot it, and it falls on the adversary's course, and it starts using out his building area. So it's annoying for the other player, and so several other units.
And along those lines, what sort of new boulders will we be experiencing in Rock Ages 3?
We also have some new cool boulders. We have a giant meatball because one of the characters that we're adding to the game is the flying spaghetti monster, which is one of my favorites. We have some of the old boulders from Rock of Ages 1 that never came back, like the giant fist. What else? The fan favorite, the giant cheese wheel. You can never go wrong with cheese, which is there in the trailer. Humpty Dumpty is also one of my absolute favorites. There's going to be a complete new game mode designed around Humpty Dumpty, which is the absolute opposite of a regular boulder. He's super fragile, can't take any damage, so we're going to have these levels that are kind of challenging, where you have to try to get to the end without getting Humpty to crack.
That sounds challenging.
Yeah.
And is there anything else that's returning from Rock Ages 1 outside of boulder skins?
I mean, this from Rock of Ages 1, there are some stuff that was in Rock of Ages 1 that we did not include in the second one.
Oh, it's nothing.
But there was very little. I mean, nothing that was really significant. So I think all the new changes we're doing are more kind of expanding on the concept itself. How can we make sure that the war matches, you never have dead time where you're not doing anything? So or new game modes that focus more on the strategy portion. We have this new game mode that's called Boulder Avalanche, where you're only setting up defenses against like an avalanche of boulders. There's like dozens of boulders trying to destroy your castle, and you have a lot more money and resources, so you can set up a lot of more structures. So yeah, nothing specific that I can remember.
Okay. Sounds like there's a lot being added to this sequel.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yes.
Because I'm sure a consideration is, how do you make this one, a justifiable purchase to those who have gotten the previous versions?
So again, it's going to be the biggest Rock of Ages experience so far, and again, I really think that the introduction of the creator mode and being able to download maps from other people will give it like a long-lasting appeal. I expect that will also have a very positive impact on the online community. More people is going to be playing it over the time. So. And this also has a complete new campaign with a complete new story and characters and boss encounters. A lot of people actually played I know a lot of people that only played the previous ones just to see the funny cinematics and fight the boss battle. So this is coming back also.
Mm. And is multiplayer going to be handled the same as Rock of Ages 2?
Pretty much. We already had a pretty solid lobby system on Rock 2. I want to make sure we continue to have that same level of depth and that people can easily connect, and you can play up to 4 players in all the permutations that are possible. You can have 2 players in split screen on one end playing against 2 other players in split screen, or you can have 4 players individually on their own systems. Yeah, it's pretty much the same online than on Rock of Ages 2.
I see. And you mentioned the competitive nature of Rock Ages previously. Have you given any thought to doing an esport mode?
A lot of people has asked about that, and it's a really cool feature. I think that, like the Eternal Cylinder, after we released the game, and we did this for Rock of Ages 2, actually a lot of the existing features in Rock of Ages 2 were developed after launch. Some cool new features. We had like the ranking system was not something that was on debut. So that is a bigger incentive alone to like have people like competing, because there's a lobby with ranked match in war mode. So if we see that take off, we'll probably want to support it in cool, interesting ways, maybe after launch. But at this point, I think we're mostly focusing on the creator stuff.
Makes sense. And let's see, just to confirm, the Nintendo Switch version of Rock Ages 3, that's being developed in tandem with the other versions this time around, correct?
This time, yes. Yes, this time we want to have a simultaneous launch on all platforms.
And much like Rock Ages 2, has there been much finagling to get Rock Ages 3 working on the Switch?
At this point, it's still early in development, so I'd expect we still have some
headaches to go through.
Yes, some difficult challenges ahead of us. I mean, mostly it's not so much the Switch alone, it's the fact that when you're simultaneously working on PC, Xbox One, PlayStation 4, and the Switch, it's really tough. And just so you guys know, this is a project that we're working in collaboration with a new studio. It's not just Ace Team. We're working with Giant Monkey Robot, which is another Chilean studio that's very talented and that is assisting us.
So yeah,
with this one.
There's no way Ace Team can make the Eternal Cylinder and Rock of Ages 3 on our own. I mean, it's a co-production Rock of Ages 3, a collaboration between Giant Monkey Robot, Ace Team.
Makes sense. I was wondering how you were handling it because, you've got 2 games going on, and, there was also Soul Seraph, in development. So you've had a lot of work.
Yeah, a lot of work. Too much, to be honest.
I suppose that gets to another question of mine. Have you considered, maybe not yourselves, but have you considered working with an outside studio to bring some of your other past games to the Nintendo Switch? Like Arcus Odyssey, Tower of Monsters, and so on and so forth.
I don't know if it would make economical sense to like the viability of porting games that are that old, Rock of Ages to.
I think one of the most difficult challenges would be to bring Unreal Engine 3 based games to the Switch, because as far as I understand, there's no Unreal Engine 3 support at the moment, and that would be a huge task alone. So I don't think it would be easy. So we're a small studio, and we managing at this moment 2 projects is stressful enough as it is. So it's not like you can really hand the source code to another company and say, okay, you guys do this. Tell me how much it's going to cost, and we see and they take it from there. It's actually just getting the files from the latest branch and making sure. And you're probably going to need a direct line of communication between your engineers and the people that are doing the port. So it's too much work for a studio of our size.
That's actually understandable. Like, people think that porting games is just a matter of power. It's really not.
No.
All kinds of weird architecture.
No. It's so much more than that.
Yeah, there's things like engine support. Basically, this is why last gen games have such a problem running on the Nintendo Switch. It's not just a matter of, say, porting Saints Row the Third to the Nintendo Switch. You actually have to take the Switch into consideration, which is why that port ended up so bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can only imagine. And you never know how much time the company that's doing the porting had, what were their resources. So I've seen some pretty terrible ports that I think it's more a thing of the resources and the time that they were able to give to the project, more so than the quality of the people that were behind, or because maybe some people think that the game just can't run on the hardware.
Right. There's all sorts of reasons why a port doesn't work on a system, especially when you're dealing with a system like the Switch, not just its architecture, but the fact that it is significantly less powerful than a PlayStation 4, for example.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Anyway, Galix, do you have any more questions for our guests at this point?
Not particularly, but looks like you got a bunch of neat projects going on, so that's good.
Yeah.
Yep. Very excited.
Indeed. I apologize that we didn't get to Soul Seraph, but there was a lot to these 2 projects.
Yeah, I was kind of hoping we'd get to talk about Soul Seraph a little bit. I don't want to get into it with just a few minutes left.
Yeah. Such is the way of time constraints. Anyway, that'll about do it for this installment of Fragments of Silicon. In case you missed the live broadcast, yes, this will be on VOD. This, it'll be in our archives both here and on YouTube. In case you missed it, because we are broadcasting at kind of an awkward time and day, So, no worries if you didn't get the live broadcast. Anyway, coming up on our Sunday review show, we will be having reviews of Mechabolt and Winds of Change. Until then, I wish you good gaming.